did my formality.
Okay, so up next is the budget work session. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to share my screen and put up a similar PowerPoint to the last time, but I'm going to move through some things. Whoops. Hold on. A little bit more quickly. How do you see it? Now you see that whole thing. Let me try a different way. Play from start. There we go. Okay, so you might remember some of these agenda items from last time. Some of them haven't changed, so I'm not going to spend really any time on them. I want to move on to the things that have changed. This is our second draft budget. So we're building off the first draft budget, and most of what we shared with you about the first draft budget continues to apply. I'll do a little introduction. I'll share some of the bigger picture items, and then I'll hand it over to Dana to talk about the details. All these aspects focus the school budgeting, goals, the process. None of that has changed. So if you have any questions about that, that's great. Feel free to ask, but I wasn't going to linger on any of it. What I did want to get to were some of the changes in the second draft. Whoops. It always does different things. There we go. Okay, so some of the changes in the second draft. First of all, this budget's a little bit higher, which is interesting, right? So the budget number is higher, but you're not going to see any increase in our tax, in the property tax rate. And you could even see a lower one because any increase we've been drawing from fund balance. So, and we'll share with you where that's going to. So but the tax levy that we had before, 1.685%, that's one of the options, and Dana shared with you another option, which is at the bottom of this one, a 0% tax increase option. So that hasn't changed. The state aid amount, interestingly enough, for this draft hasn't changed. But I say that's interestingly enough because the situation with the state budget, we expect has changed dramatically with the new federal law. So I'll probably mention some things about that. Actually, I was going to mention some things about that later in the evening, but essentially the American Recovery Act injects a lot of money into state, municipality, and school district budgets. None of that's reflected in this because none of that has been presented to us in terms of the normal way that state budgets get broken down in the runs that we usually get. So we should know about that by April 1st. Could be a little bit before then, could be a little bit after then. So right now we're operating off of the same state aid numbers that we started with. So this budget doesn't account for that. Nothing over the tax cap. It includes the same building aid that we originally estimated based on our fiscal advisors there, and based on our construction project. So what's increased here is total revenue from fund balance. So you can see here it was 71,186. It's increased to 214,739. Now that's a much higher number. It's about 3 times what we had started with. But in contrast to the last time we used fund balance for a budget, it's less than half of what we utilized, not this year's budget, but the previous year's budget. So it's still actually a pretty low number when it comes to utilizing fund balance. The other, however, option is to use more fund balance, to double that amount to about a little bit more than doubling it to $496,000. And then, and as Dana's provided this option to you, provide a 0% tax increase option. There are pros and cons to doing that. And that would be something for the board, I think, to talk about, to decide on. I think probably by the time we're at the third draft, you might want to land somewhere there. You could land at 0, you could land at 1.65, 685. You could also land somewhere in the middle if you wanted to propose that. So those are some of the big changes. Again, Dana will talk to you more about that. In terms of the large expenses, you can see here between the blue line is the 2021 budget. The red line is the budget we presented a month ago, the first draft. And then the green line is the budget we presented, we're presenting tonight, the second draft. And you can see there's a little bit of an increase in salaries because you're going to see just some extra positions. You're going to see a little drop in benefits, and that's from some of the changes that Dana was able to find and make for this budget. Debt service is essentially the same. And then you're going to see over in BOCES, you can't quite tell here because it's the actual number is lower than the rest. It's about $1.5 million, but there is an increase in BOCES expenses in this second draft compared to the first draft. You might remember last time we didn't know what our BOCES expenses were going to be. We estimated, I think it was 3%, Dana, but it came in higher than that. And that didn't come in at that level at the administrative budget. You heard about the administrative budget last time. It was basically the same, very, very close to the same as this year. It really comes in at the CTE expenses. In other words, the cost of sending kids to classes. So that's where expenses were much higher than we anticipated. That's included in this budget too. The breakdown though is pretty similar. Some of the specific numbers have changed because of some, because of the changes for the second draft, but essentially the administrative portion of this budget is the smallest portion. The capital portion is the next largest portion, but the largest portion, 78.48%, is still in programs. And the second draft budget increases the program expenses from 3.84 to 4.80. So again, those increases that we're talking about in here, they're going to where it matters the most, to kids and programs. So last time we shared with you known and unknown. In most cases, well, in all cases, the known haven't changed because we knew them then and they haven't changed. A couple of things though are now recently known. No surprise, the final property tax cap came in on March 1st, just as Dana had originally calculated. So it really didn't change. What did change was BOCES costs. We estimated 3.0% increase. It was actually 6.35% increase. And then the things that we don't know, and so we can't tell you how this will turn out for this draft, but we could hope that in time for the third draft and the final draft, that we'll know the answers to these questions. How much will final state aid amounts be, including the impact of the American Rescue Plan Act? And therefore, that's going to determine ultimately our state aid numbers. So it's an important revenue piece that we would expect, frankly, it to go up because of overall revenue statewide going up in such a dramatic way with this rescue plan. And therefore, we don't know that, and therefore we also don't know how much fund balance to use because presumably the more state aid we use, if we don't create a budget that has any additional expenditures or expenditures don't go down, expenditures stay the same, and more state aid would probably result in less use of fund balance, right? So, so what we're sharing with you tonight is what we do know, and that doesn't include those state aid numbers based on the injection of federal money. So it still includes special ed teacher, special ed teaching assistant, still includes a district server, still includes funding for professional development, still includes summer school, and it still includes the family visitation coordinator. All these were additions to the first draft. For the second draft, we did include some of the new ideas we had talked about in here, and so we decided to put those in here and let the board see how it turns out. We also included in here the free meals for all students for next year. In other words, all of our students are getting free meals this year on the federal program. I forget the name of it, Dana. You know it. You know the name. But the other is the social studies teacher. What we're proposing to do is to include an additional social studies teacher to allow for 1 year of developing some very important programs that we just can't do on the tight staffing that we have in social studies. So we've been we've been making a priority diversity, equity, and inclusion. And Martha's going to talk about some of the conversations that are going on in that committee right now. We've also been making a priority over the last few years, what I've referred to at times as the democracy initiative or civics education. It's hard when we have only 4 teachers at the middle and high school level to make any to take many steps forward there. So for 1 year, with Jeanette Dugan coming back, having done her sabbatical, we thought to take advantage of that, provide a 1-year teacher on special assignment, which allows us to develop some of these ideas K-12, and that would be a position that if we're funding it with fund balance, we would know that it's not a position that would need to be sustained unless a future board decided to do that. But we know what we have in fund balance, and so we know for 1 year we could fund that. And that's also the case for the free meals. We would be talking about doing that for an additional year. So we know that that's not something to sustain in perpetuity, and therefore what we have on hand for our fund balance could cover that for next year. So we put those into this budget. Any questions about those ideas? Yes, Colleen.
Hi, Roger. So I have some questions about the 1 year social studies teacher. I think you just said that maybe we would use the fund balance possibly, and I want to preface this by saying that I do feel it's really important that we address these issues, try to incorporate them into the curriculum, into the school culture. I know that we approved Jeanette back, I don't know when it was, maybe in November, for her to receive half pay with benefits to go off and to receive accreditation in this area. Is she going to be the person that takes on this role, or I guess I'm just concerned that with the additional special ed teachers at the elementary school and the possible two TAs that Sarah Allen said we may need to fund, that I'm just wondering why classroom teachers and then with the assistance of school counselors can't incorporate these important strategies into existing curriculum that we're actually paying for someone else to come in for a year to do this. And I don't know. I was hoping it was going to be grant funded, and that there was some grant that Jeanette found while she was out, obtaining this accreditation. And I don't know. I struggle with it a little bit, putting funding into this, but also I understand we need to support this, but I don't understand why existing teachers and school counselors and Jeanette's feedback wouldn't be enough to suffice for this when there's so many other needs throughout the district. And I'm going to mention this again because every year at budget time, I lobby for that full-time math RTI person in the elementary school, and we've yet to do that. And again, I do feel that the diversity inclusion topic is especially important, but sometimes for me, I look at it as triage. I mean, what now? I mean, for me, the math person is more important full-time in the elementary school than hiring a special person to do this. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I guess in my answer to you would be the general approach here would be to provide the time. So whenever you ask teachers, we usually every year have new things for people to do. Sometimes it's their goals, sometimes it's our goals, and usually the feedback we get is we want to do this, but we need more time. That's really what we get, and so what this would be, the objective here would be to provide that time to do the kind of work, the kind of K-12 curriculum work that typically we don't cross over very well because we only have 2 half days a year to work on that, and sometimes 2 full days if we can make those work too. So people are always asking for more time. This would be a way to provide time to the K-12 social studies curriculum through a person who would have that time dedicated to it. That would be the belief behind it. So
I think it's tough because, like you just said, Roger, with the federal government kind of windfall coming in, that's wonderful. But I mean, do we need to tap into a fund balance for this? I don't know. I just I'm not sold on it. I think it's a very important issue, but I also think has to be ways within the existing faculty and counselors that we should be able to accomplish this. But that's just my thoughts.
Okay. Thanks, Colleen.
Can I chime in real quickly?
Yes.
So if you look at the increase in the fund balance, it's about $214,000 from the first revision. In reality, the bulk of that increase is really tied to the free meals. We increased that line item from $90,000 to $215,000. So when you look at it and tying the social studies teacher position into the fund balance, it really, we could move the fund balance back down to, $77,000, and I am pretty sure we could still fund the social studies position for 1 year. But the key there is it's the fact that it's a 1 year position, that we're not necessarily looking at it as a permanent tenure track probationary position, but a 1 year position. So it can be funded, and it's not really coming from the increase in the fund balance. That is really, the bulk of that is providing meals for every student.
Is there any way, Dana, and again, to kind of borrow from Peter to pay Paul, to try to find at some point the funding for a full-time math person? I just know that I don't think our scores have necessarily increased I'm just speaking at the elementary level, and with what the children in the building have gone through with the loss of time last spring and even a few days this year, I just think it's still a really important issue, and I hate to kind of beat a dead horse every spring, but I do bring this up every year, and I'm hoping at some point that we can uncover funding to find that important position to fill.
Well, perhaps we could, as we're working on the third draft, that would be some feedback we could maybe inject into this and see what we can come up with.
Thanks for listening.
I mean, it's all about the federal dollar. We can do both.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
My problem with adding another full-time person is the legacy costs that come with it. Not only,
Right.
but you're looking at retirement, you're looking at health insurance, and every time we put on a new teacher for a prolonged period, the legacy costs incrementally go up as well. So,
But
Right.
maybe John Burdick could be better used somewhere else in the district. I mean, he's doing it half-time currently. Maybe he could be better utilized elsewhere. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. That's why Dana is there in the background, and Roger and you and Rick. But I hear these things out in the community, and I feel that when I pass somebody, when I'm walking around Mirror Lake, or I see them in Hannaford's, I feel like I have an obligation to come and say things when parents ask me questions. So I just feel it's important for me to kind of speak up.
I think it's important too, Colleen. Thanks for that.
Thank you.
So on your comment about the time, is it time in like personnel time, man hours as it were, or is it time in the curriculum? Because I know that teachers are under a lot of pressure to get through the, a certain amount of the material for the testing. So which is it, or is it a mixture of both?
It would be I guess what I'm talking about. Am I muted? No, I'm not. Okay, so you guys can hear online. So time to develop curriculum. So there's a few things that we would need to do. One is to understand what we're teaching and not teaching K-12. In other words, where are the gaps, right? Number two is to actually work with other teachers. That's what we never have time for. That's probably the number one thing that we don't have time for, is the ability for, You know, in this case, maybe a teacher who is very well versed in the high school curriculum to work with the first grade or the second grade or the third grade. Because everyone's always teaching their kids, right? So there's no time for collaboration at that level. We do find time for collaboration like amongst grade level teams. We're good at that. And then the only other times we can really collaborate are on those dedicated days. That's why I said before, 2 half days and maybe a couple full days if we can make it work. Those days are dedicated when kids aren't in the building. We can get teachers together to work on things. So, for example, the last one we had back in February was K-12 curriculum work, where we actually had high school, middle school, and elementary school teachers working together, but it was only for an hour and a half. And so it's just limited in what you can do. So if you really want to do some significant work in a curricular area, you got to find more time somehow. And so that's what I meant by more time. Yeah. And so Dana, this is where you were going to start talking about the details. So you want to take it from here?
I'm looking to see if I can. Looks like you got to stop sharing.
Okay, I'll stop sharing and then you can start.
Okay, where do we want to start? Okay, I believe this is the first one. Well, actually, I think what Karen did with this agenda was she moved down the tax cap calculation, but as Roger said, that hasn't changed, so we won't spend any time really on that because those numbers are the same as the last. They will be the same going forward. That is the max 1.68. What you're seeing here is the appropriations, the tentative budget. It is a little different version from the last time. If you happen to see it, basically what I've done is I turned it into how it would appear in the budget booklets. This is basically how someone picking up the budget booklet in a month or so will see the information in there. I won't go through it line by line. I don't know if anyone has any questions specific to the appropriation side. And you'll notice it's not even every account code. It's everything kind of filled right in. So teaching equipment, that's all equipment for the program side of it. So 26,500. So it's not showing you each individual line. It's basically showing you the same categories: equipments, materials, contractual. The salaries you can see are out. But does anyone have any specific questions about the appropriation side of it? Probably let me make sure I hit it right. This is probably the one area that I would think we probably will need to discuss is the direction we want to go when it comes to the revenue. As Roger pointed out, this is what it looks like with using the tax levy at 1.68, rounds up to 1.69. This is how it looks with using that. This hasn't changed from the first revision, with the exception of the appropriated fund balance is now up to $214,000 as opposed to the $77,000. And then the second version is shifting the tax levy difference, so the amounts down to the fund balance. So keeping the tax levy the same, which means approximately $7.24. But that actually could change as well slightly. That doesn't get finalized until August. Really, that final number, once everything is calculated by the counties and stuff like that, and our overall property value, in theory, that number could even shift down a little bit, and it could go from 724 down a couple cents, depending on the overall value of all of our properties. Since I've been in this position, every year, the total value of our properties within the district has gone up every year. So whenever there's homes being sold and they're being sold higher than their assessed value, and they reassess them, or homes are being built, that all gets added. I think the communities here, they do a nice job of equalizing it every year. So I think that's why we see that increase in the total value every year. Questions on the revenue? Really, for between the two, the only real difference is the tax levy versus no tax levy, and shifting that. Ken kind of preface it, and Roger's mentioned this as well because of the state's unknowns, but really, from what everything I'm reading, even I suspect that we probably won't even tap into the allocated fund balance that's listed there at this point, $496,000. If the money comes in, the additional money that comes in. And again, as Roger said, we won't know that until the budget is approved and allocations are distributed. But there is, from what I can see, a good likelihood that our state revenue will increase, whether that's coming directly from the state and or a combination with additional funds from the federal government. One thing I would think with that could do, even though it's potentially a one-year windfall, is when I look at this and I project out 3, 4, 5 years, windfall this year would just push out in terms of us being able to do some things down the road after this year, and still use or tap into the fund balance and continue doing some of the programming that we're doing when I look at it in terms of right now. Any comments on the revenue? This right here is basically just a summary of what you've seen in terms of the changes, administratively, program, capital. Roger mentioned the BOCES. That's an increase of 6.35%. One of the things I don't think Roger shared with you is the real number. The CTE budget, BOCES budget number was actually upwards of like a 18% increase from last year's budgets. It was $140,000 increase from last year in terms of the CTE portion of BOCES.
Due to usage, or is it?
Hold on, I'm not muted. So what's it due to? It's due to usage, but in particular, it's due to a new calculation that BOCES is using to determine different costs between their true CTE programs. I'm talking about automotive, culinary, those, and then the alternative ed program that they run, which is referred to as the PASS program. That's an acronym. So we tend to use the PASS program fairly heavily compared to other school districts. As a matter of fact, Saranac Lake doesn't send any kids to the PASS program, so it's just Lake Placid and Tupper Lake in the south end. That means we pay a high proportion of that. They calculated those students at, Dana, you might remember this better than me, but approximately $4,000 more per student than the CTE students. This is the first time they've done that. And so the area that we use the most, proportionally the most, pass, is also costing a much higher percentage or a higher amount per student. And that's probably the #1 reason why. We actually went down. Our administrative costs went down because overall, our WADA, the way they calculated percentage of use, went also decreased. So we're actually paying less in administrative, but much higher amount in CTE because of those new calculations. So yes, it's all based on use and how they calculate that use.
Thank you.
One of the things that what has kept it not as extreme is what Roger was just saying. We actually had a slight decrease in the administrative, but also last year when we built the BOCES budgets and the number they gave us, after the budget was approved, they came back with a new number. They basically decided to change how they were calculating the CTE, and they pulled out some programs that weren't even in the south ends that we were paying for up until last year, and it ended up reducing our number by like $20,000. But the budget that we approved last year and what they gave us was actually $20,000 higher. So I was able to adjust that out. So that's why you're not seeing as big of you're not seeing a 12 or 13% increase. Is because of that, is because the number that we were going off of from last year. So in the end, you can see that right now what it's looking like is about a $727,000 increase, 3.64%, pointing out that 150,000 of that additional increase is from the meals, providing every meals, and that is not even fully funding it. Betsy and I, when we looked at the food service and the cafeteria plan, we did factor in what we would get in reimbursements from the state and federal through the child nutrition program based on free and reduced lunch numbers. So we did look at that. So that is factored into that price, that allocation as well. And typically, the last few years, we spend about $330,000 to operate the cafeteria. And we anticipate about $115,000 to $120,000 in reimbursements from the state and federal governments. So between the two, that's how we're looking at funding the meals. And one of the things we've done is we noticed that with this year, because all the meals are free, we didn't see the number of paper applications that typically come in. So our numbers are a little lower than what we typically would see for free and reduced lunch because of that. But we didn't base our calculation on that. We based it on the known in terms of the direct certification for free and reduced lunch kids. So we're not even anticipating the paper application reimbursements. We're going off of the actual number that we would get from the county. Questions on this second run of the budgets? That's just the PowerPoint. So I think that's all the documents.
You want to just scroll up to the last slide, Dana? Oh, that is the last slide. Okay.
Yeah, that's the last one because the next one I have is your PowerPoints.
Got it. Okay.
Yep. So we looked at these three here, C, D, and E.
Okay.
turn it back over. If you don't have any questions.
Any questions anybody has?
Okay, so will that do it for the budget workshop?
I think so.
Okay. We'll come out of the budget workshop and go to For Good of the Cause. Any emails, Karen? No. Okay. Reports to the board. The budget performance report. I have to say I like that title. Better than the budget status report. So. Dana?
Well, hopefully everyone's had a chance to review it. It is, yeah, I like it as well in terms of it really is a performance review. That's what we're kind of looking at each month is how is everything performing, revenue and expense wise. So we keep continue to trend the way we've been doing it since the beginning. Year to or our month to date revenue, that's up. That's favorable by $217,000. Expenditures, according to this, is unfavorable because it's up $168,000. But yeah, this is just comparing February to February. So that's just a month look. It's not like an overall view. It's really the next part there. The fiscal year to date is really where we want to, focus the attention, is because of where are we with generating our revenue. Year to date, we're a little over $18 million that we have brought in. This is $89,000 more than where we were at this time last year. And you can see the various categories are up as versus state resources, and that's not uncommon when it comes to the state resources. Expenditures, right? Same thing there. We are still trending below where we were last year. Says $834,000 less than last year, and you can see where all of that's playing out. Just about every category except from contractual is less than where we were last year. The very bottom of it shows you the projection. We're still projecting very well. In fact, if you look at it, we are actually projecting bringing in more revenue than what we budgeted at this point in time. I can say, since I've been in this position, we typically don't get to our budgeted revenue amounts. We build a budget and we spend accordingly, even though it's a balanced budget. Generally speaking, we don't spend what we budget and we don't bring in the revenue that we budget. But right now we are projecting that to be not the case. And part of that is some revenue that we weren't anticipating, like the refund that we got from the health consortium of a little over $210,000. We got a rebate back from our dental plan of about $10,000 as well. So things that no way we can anticipate back a year ago what we were going to get that money. So we're projecting well, and in the end, that's what it comes down to, is if we're watching what we spend, and we are, because we're still not operating at 100% capacity in terms of field trips and sports trips and things like that. But the revenue is still projected to be what is budgeted, puts us in a good financial position at the end of the year. Questions on the performance update? Treasury report now. So when you look at that, again, we're not seeing anything out of the ordinary here. We still have a considerable amount of money in our cash sweep. Approximately 11 million of that is from our revenue from the the general fund. $4 million is still is from the capital funds. So we still have a considerable amount of money in our capital fund that's just sitting there. So that will keep trending down as we start paying off and contractors start to finish, as they finish their punch lists and we get to the approval from Mosaic to make final payments, that number will go down. I think it's still trending where I don't believe we are going to spend on the capital projects what we budgeted. I think that is still the case, that we are going to have some leftover revenue in the capital funds. And then there's a couple of options that we can explore when that time comes in terms of what to do with that. You can see we had $854,000 in outstanding checks. It's kind of a trend these last few months where we're having a higher than what we would typically see in terms of outstanding checks. And again, I've said it the last 2 months, and it really still is true this month as well. It's really just the timing and when we send payments out. We've had some delays in delays, as well as not being as consistent getting our claims auditor in to review all of our payments before we schedule payments. So we haven't had the consistency there over the last 3 months, and that is reflective in when payments go out. Like this month, we're not going to do another run of checks until just before spring break. So towards the end of the month. But there's no surprise there in terms of where a lot of dollar amounts are. I'm looking at it. BOCES payments make up nearly $500,000 of that $800,000. 2 checks alone. So, but again, in terms of the treasury report, everything is looking very good.
Any questions for Dana? Thank you, Dana. Next up is the diversity, equity, and inclusion quarterly report. Prior to the chair, Martha, giving her report, just wanted to share. I recently asked the question if the DEI committee was a direct committee under the board. I asked that question of Roger, and he gave me a extremely comprehensive answer, which was greatly appreciated. So I thought it would worth just paraphrasing, and please, Roger, if I misparaphrase, you let me know. A few years ago, the Board of Education undertook the work of committee reorganization. So they looked at all the committees, and the intent of the reorganization was to allow committees like DEI to be sanctioned by the board under the umbrella of the shared decision-making unit. Therefore, the DEI committee falls under the approved board committees, specifically under the shared decision-making unit. So if you have any, is that a quick, concise?
That's pretty good. Yeah, that's pretty good. Colleen will remember when we had a shared decision-making committee, because she and I were on that a long time ago, and we did a lot of good stuff. When we reorganized, the shared decision-making committee tried to reorganize itself just as a shared decision-making committee. The committee kind of struggled. And when the reorganization group, and that was Pat Stanton and Patty Gallagher were leading that, they really identified a number of other areas, excuse me, another number of other areas that the board could take up. And I won't go on naming them because I can't remember them all, but what they decided was that shared decision-making could serve as this umbrella, and that these ideas that had particular energy and interest could be organized under that umbrella, and then utilize the shared decision-making organization. And those are things like having board member, administrator, teachers, community members, parents involved, which I believe would probably reflect all the components of the diversity committee right now. So those kinds of things, so that these efforts that have particular energy, and they might only be here for 6 months or a year or 2 years or whatever it is, could still operate under the standing umbrella of shared decision making, and then new ideas could also come in as they rise to the surface and get practice like that. So, yeah.
Thank you. With that being said, Martha, the floor is yours.
How's this? Can you hear me now? Great. I said I'm not going to repeat what I wrote in the report. I'm more interested in a sort of free-flowing discussion. The work group has asked for guidance from the board about the idea of equity versus equality. Very commonly, people get those words mixed up, and I hear about the diversity, equality, and inclusion committee rather than equity. So I promised I would ask the board for your thoughts in this regard, so you could give a little guidance to the committee.
By thoughts, you mean thoughts about the difference, the distinction between equity and equality?
Mm-hmm.
I know people always like to distinguish between the two. I tend to be one that likes to embrace the two because I think of them both as noble purposes.
Mm.
But I don't know.
Well, isn't that I mean, in my mind, isn't that the opportunity gap? Right? Like, yeah, they're all born equal under the law, but clearly if you're not getting proper nutrition and you can't come to school bathed, that's going to impact. To me, that's how I see the difference between equity and equality. Equality is under the law, and equity is the factors that are ultimately going to determine how you end up in life.
That's good. Thank you. That might just do it. Any other thoughts? I'm so pleased that Mary Dietrich has joined this committee, and Jason Hooker from Shipman Youth Center just agreed to join. And this morning I met with a small group of faith leaders and asked for someone from that group to join the committee as well. Just trying to get around lots of perspectives.
How many members?
Do you have on?
Over 30.
Oh, wow.
They don't all show up.
Right. It's a pretty large group.
It is. There's a lot of energy around this.
There are a lot of teachers. A lot of teachers volunteering to join, not being told to or representing a particular quadrant. There's just a lot.
Yeah.
And a lot of our young teachers are involved.
Yeah, that reminds me that Taylor Prosper and Caitlin Patnode are going to lead next month's meeting, actually this month's meeting. And Taylor volunteered that. He thought that would be something that he and she could put together. And so he's done it on his own time. And I appreciate that very much.
Any questions or additional comments for Martha, from Martha? If not, thank you very much. And thanks
Martha?
for your, Colleen, go ahead.
Martha, in the verbiage here, it says something about, let's see, the discussions can be lively. So I'm just wondering if you can share what the liveliness is about. Is it difference of opinion? Is it approach? Is it what we're trying to accomplish from this?
I think the best characterization is that it's differences of opinion or different priorities. Some people have a real clear agenda and they know something that they want to deal with or address. Others are more, don't have a specific agenda item. And sometimes those things are a little bit in conflict, but not in a bad way, in a good way.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you. Superintendent's report.
Okay. I thought for my superintendent's report, I'd talk a little bit more about these national and statewide issues that are going to impact us. Share a couple of ideas that we have for the coming weeks, and then just share some news from the schools. So I'll start with the national and statewide issues. So earlier this month, you probably know, President Biden signed the American Rescue Plan, which includes federal aid for states, localities, and school districts. I mentioned that earlier. Overall education funding in this new law is more than double the amount that was allocated in the last 2 relief bills. So it is very significant. Specific percentages have also been set aside to address specific issues like learning loss and summer school programs and other programming to help students recover from the educational disruptions during the pandemic. Now remember, these are national. This is a national law, so it's attempting to address the problems that have been experienced everywhere. We've experienced these things differently than have been done across the country. You know about that. We've been running in-person schooling all year long, and so our issues are going to be different than theirs. But the law is consistent for everybody. In addition, $3 billion was set aside to increase support for special education. Right now, we don't have a full listing of what our allocation is going to be district by district. But there are some estimates out there, and the closest estimate would be that district allocations from the new aid is going to be about 7 times what districts received last year through the CARES Act. And for us, that was about a little over $100,000. Our estimate then would be something over $700,000 likely allocated to next year's budget, or it just happened last week, but that's the impact. Now, on top of that, as I mentioned before, we were dealing with dramatic shortfalls in the state budget, and of course, the executive budget reflected that shortfalls in the state budget. So some additions to from the federal money, and then some offsets in order to cover some of the state deficits. Well, the state funding is in this law too. And so we don't expect to see that level of shortfall. So it remains to be seen how this is going to impact the budget, but pay attention, because I think it could be a significant change. So that's the national and statewide piece I wanted to mention, or I guess reiterate from what I said before. Some ideas. Dana mentioned before about the health insurance rebate that we had earlier this year, right? So we did get a rebate of $210,000 from our health insurance expenses from last year. So in other words, the consortium, that's the consortium of school districts in the FEH BOCES, we're self-insured, we contribute money, that money becomes part of the health insurance fund, and that fund is what pays for people's health care, right? The whole consortium spent much less than was projected last year. And a part of that, not all of it, a part of that was rebated to the districts. Ours was that $210,000. So you might also know, and so we did collect that $210,000, as Dana mentioned. That's gone back into our bank account, right? But you might also know, and this is where the new idea comes in. You might also know that some of those health insurance costs, payments are made by our employees themselves. There's a health insurance contribution that each employee makes. And so reflecting on that, we thought that this would be a good moment to provide some of that reimbursement back to the employees for their contribution. So our idea is to provide all employees with a health insurance contribution holiday. And that would be for the remaining pay periods of the year. So during that time, instead of having a small amount of money taken out of their check, that wouldn't be taken out of their check. That would be the holiday piece. We think that this would be one small way for them to share in the cost savings and in the rebate that we received. As I said before, they made the contribution too. We also think it's just a good opportunity to give back to our employees during a year when this has been very, very challenging and they've risen to that challenge. So I want to mention that and also let you know that I would be welcome to any of your feedback on that idea. This is a new idea. We've never done this before. There's a lot of things we've never done before that we're doing this at this time. So I would be happy to answer any questions or listen to any feedback from you on that. Yes, Colleen.
Roger?
Yeah.
I think it's a great idea. I think it's a wonderful idea if you've had some type of a windfall back from the consortium to send it back to the faculty at the end of this ridiculous 1-year period that we've had. So I think it's a great idea.
Great. Thanks, Colleen.
I agree. I think that's a great gesture to show that we value all the sacrifices and the extra work that they've done.
Thanks. Thanks. And if you have any other feedback, feel free to, let me or let Dana know. We've been working on this. Dana, Betsy Smith, and I have been discussing this over the last week or so. So feel free to provide us any feedback or any questions you have about it. Okay. So another idea we have right now, you may or may not know this. We have a couple of boxes. Karen's storing them for us in the administrative building. We have a couple of boxes of rapid tests that we have not used. We haven't really been sure how to use how to use them well. So we are thinking right now of organizing a voluntary rapid test day at the end of spring break. In other words, we would be asking our nurses to provide a few hours on the Sunday before students, staff, and families return to school after spring break who wish to get tested. So this would be an option. This would not be a requirement, but it could offer people some peace of mind, especially those who are traveling or returning from wherever they were traveling after our 2-week spring break, to know it might just offer them some peace of mind to know that there's a testing option for them. If they were to take a test and receive that negative, that might help them. If it were positive, they would be able to address that before returning to school when it becomes kind of a bigger issue for people. So again, new idea. Any thoughts or comments from you on that one?
I know
That's
that's
a good idea too, Roger. I do think there's going to be a lot of people that are coming back into town and maybe they don't want the public notice of it, but I do think it's a wonderful way because a lot of people will return from Florida and other parts and they may be concerned. And if you have that stockpile, why not use it?
That's what we were thinking. And this, by the way, is again, a collaborative idea. Our principals, our nurses, our school district physician, we've been talking about this. So this is where this is coming from. Any other feedback, ideas, input, questions?
Isn't the travel restrictions being lifted on April 1 as well?
Well, that is true. Yes.
So when people are coming back, is that going to carry over into school districts as well? Or are our policies staying the same?
So we don't have a policy on traveling and being quarantined or tested. That is right now a state policy. On April 1st, that's no longer a state policy, right? So our policy is to make sure people are following the state policy. So up to now, we've been sort of sharing with people, if you're going traveling, be sure you're following these routines, which usually involves quarantining and testing. But starting April 1st, which, as you know, is before the return from spring break, that will no longer be the case. We did come up with this idea before that changed. That just changed a few days ago. But I think it does kind of add to perhaps the impetus behind coming up, offering people this kind of option.
I think it's probably a good idea, and I think that it will help to ease that transition from less freedom to more freedom, moving around and making people feel a little more secure sending their kids back to school.
Yeah. Again, it would be optional, so I don't know how many people would take advantage of it, but we want to put it out there for people. All right. That's it for new ideas. News from the schools. So as I said, spring break is right around the corner. Between now and then, here are some things that you can expect. At the middle and high school, well, both schools, this is the end of the third quarter. So this Friday is the end of the third quarter. So like any normal year, grades will be finalized at the end of this week. They'll be submitted to produce report cards. Report cards will go home at the end of next week. I like the fact that that's a very normal aspect of school that's happening during a somewhat less than normal school year. So best of luck to all of our students as they finish up this quarter and move on to the final quarter of school. At the middle high school, there's also a shoe drive that's actually being carried out at the elementary school as well. If you see boxes on the sidewalks, they're there, especially when you drop off or pick up children. They're there to collect shoes that are being donated. So this is the Needy Feet Shoe Drive. It's a National Honor Society project being led by a high school junior, Hannah Wiley, and other members of the NHS. So this is a project that Hannah brought to our school. She's a new student here in our school district. Shoes that are being collected, and they'll be sent to the Democratic Republic of Congo. So a really exciting, good work going on thanks to Hannah and the NHS students who are behind it. At the elementary school, kindergarten registration has begun. So families of children who will be 5 years old by December 1st are eligible to register. And for those of you who have children or have children who have recently been in kindergarten, you know what an exciting time that is. So we're really happy for all those families who are getting ready to register their children for kindergarten. Last week, there was a special day at the elementary school. I had mentioned that it was coming, but I didn't mention the day because it was a surprise. It was Bomber Day. So last Wednesday, Bomber Day in the afternoon, it was a big hit. Students were surprised with outdoor options in the afternoon. These things included snow art, snow sculptures, what else? Nest building, sun catchers, and other fun and educational activities that they did outside. It didn't hurt that it was sunny and warm, but the snow was still piled high, and they really had a good time. So I want to just say thank you to our elementary school faculty. This is an idea that Kathy Briggs, our music teacher, raised up to the faculty. Then people took it on and organized these activities. It turned out to be a terrific day, according to many of our students. And this was many teachers shared this. Their students said that this was the best day ever. So it was a lot of fun last week at the elementary school. And then the elementary school is still celebrating Read Across America Month. And I mentioned some fun days still ahead. Fun Hair and Hat Day is Friday. And then next Friday, the last day before spring break, is Pajama Day and Drop Everything and Read Day. So that's activity at the elementary school. Finally, so spring break, as you know, as I said, is around the corner. It's less than 2 weeks away, but it might be a time just to reflect on this past year briefly. It really has been quite a year. It was 1 year ago today, March 16th, 2020, that we closed school for the first time, right? So our last day of school was March 13th, then the weekend, and then on March 16th, Monday, there was no school. Our schools handed out devices that day. Teachers planned lessons at that time that they were going to be delivering for the first time ever from home to students at home. Remote instruction became a term that we all became familiar with, right? It became a reality 1 year ago today, and that's contrasted with another term that we now utilize all the time, in-person instruction. We didn't used to say, is it remote or in person? We just said school, right? Our cafeteria staff at that time, they began to prepare breakfasts and lunches to be delivered to students at home, first time ever. Our bus drivers stopped shuttling students around and started delivering meals. Our custodians added the word disinfect to everything that they did cleaning wise. So when you look ahead from this date, 1 year ago, we had no idea what to expect. We had no idea how long it was going to last. I thought that maybe school would be closed 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe till spring break, and we'd be back in session after spring break. The last thing I ever thought was going to happen was that the governor of the state of New York was going to cancel spring break. And yet that's exactly what happened. So it was a year like absolutely no other. But unlike last year, this year, we're going to have spring break. We are going to have a spring break. I'm going to guarantee that right now to everybody out there who's listening. We are going to have a spring break. I'm not going to announce spring break is canceled this year. I will not do that. Spring break is on this year. It's well-deserved. And I think that we as a school district, our teachers, our staff, our students, our families have so much to be proud of and so much to celebrate, and they have earned this spring break. So congratulations to everybody. Spring break is around the corner. Please enjoy it. And that's everything I have tonight.
Great, thank you very much.
Roger,
Yes, Colleen.
Roger, I know it's early, but has there been any discussions that maybe there could be some type of a normal graduation and then moving up for 5th and 8th graders? Have we gone in there? I mean, what do you think could happen?
So you're right, it's early, but it is looking more promising, and we are talking about this every day. We have administrative meetings every week, and what we're talking about is how do we make the rest of the school year more, again, we use this term a lot, more normal.
Yeah.
And how do we get back to some of the important things that we were doing? Not everything, not all at once, but how do we get back to some of the important things that we were doing? We will be making some changes after spring break. Before we get to the end of the year, things like allowing some more movement around the school for students, probably changing some classrooms rather than being in the same room all day long. We think that that's now safe to do. But the statewide guidance is actually opened up for a lot of events. And so we, looking at that, we think that we're going to have that. We're also having a group, the junior class, a group of juniors. The junior class is planning a reimagined prom. And they would like to be able to organize something that would provide them and the seniors with the prom experience they did not have last year. And yet that won't include dancing. We're not ready for that. I don't think anybody's ready for that yet, but it might include the formal or semi-formal wear and some other kind of activity, sort of combining the after prom idea with the prom idea in a way that's safe, approved, but also kind of allows our students to really have that experience again. So the prom is kind of the next thing on the list. But yes, we're talking about graduation. We think, last year we had an outdoor graduation, and we think that this year we're in much better shape than we were last year. So
Okay.
yeah,
Great.
I'm hopeful.
Great. Thanks, Roger.
Sure.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you for that report. Information for the board. There are several attachments. Claims audit for ending 12/31/20, the Adirondack Park Agency info extracurricular account, and then a MOA correction. Any comments or questions on any of those? Okay. Linking goals with agenda items.
I'll say that I think some leadership was shown definitely on the part of our district superintendent to take the initiative to create those, the give back of the medical insurance expenses and the use of the rapid test. I think that showed some real, for a guy who's on his way out, that showed some real initiative. It
wasn't all my initiative.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Dana. He was giving you credit. I don't know if you could hear.
He's muted now.
We'll figure it out right as we don't need it anymore.
Yeah, I was muted just like you guys were.
Any other links? If not, if you think of any or come across any, please get them to Karen. Meeting minutes is next up. That's under the consent agenda. Personnel items. 7A is a teaching staff maternity leave. I'm on mute. Okay. Teaching staff maternity leave and extension request. Upon recommended action of the superintendent, approve the maternity leave request and extension of Amy Strack, math teacher at the middle and high school, beginning on or about April 26, 2021 through June 30th, 2022, in accordance with Article 19B of the LPEA contract dated July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2023. May I have a motion to accept this maternity leave and extension?
Yes.
Colleen.
Thank you, because I'm doing board docs.
Okay. Colleen, may I have a second, please?
I'll second.
Okay, Dan. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Through June 30th of 2022. Should that be?
That's right. So our contract allows for up to 2 years maternity leave, or we used to call it paternity leave, but it's up to 2 years. For some of that time, it's paid. That's usually attached to use of sick days. For 20 weeks, up to 20 weeks, there's health insurance is included in that. And then for all the additional time, it's unpaid leave. But that's, yes, anything within 2 years is part of the contract.
Roger, does the person on maternity leave, do they have to pay their own health insurance after the 20 weeks?
They do. They have to figure out their own health insurance. Sometimes they'll utilize a spouse's option. Sometimes they'll pay COBRA, and sometimes they'll go a different route. There are other ways to go. Yes.
Any other discussion? Please vote.
Yes.
7 yes.
7 yes, 0 no's. The motion passes. Next item up is a teaching staff maternity leave request. Upon recommended action of the superintendent, approve the maternity leave request of Kelly O'Reilly Wamenti. Is that Wamet? Thank you. Special education teacher at the elementary school beginning September 1st, 2021 through November 12th, 2021, in accordance with Article 19B of the LPEA contract. May I have a motion to approve this maternity leave request? Is that Joan and Daniel?
John and Danny.
Thank you. Any discussion on this leave request? If not, I'll ask you to vote.
Yes.
Yes, I don't have a pop-up. Oh,
There we go.
7 yes.
7 yes, 0 no. The motion passes. CSEA staff retirement. Upon recommendation of the superintendent, accept the resignation of Betty Fortune.
Did I put resignation,
Retirement, I'm sorry, of Betty Fortune, food service worker at the middle and high school, effective August 31st, 2021. May I have a motion, please?
Yeah.
Thank you, Dan.
retirement?
Thank you, Joan. Any discussion?
How long has Betty worked here?
So Betty's been here for 20 years, I believe since 2001. 2000, so a little bit over 20 years. She's been working in the cafeteria for all that time. I would have to say that Betty had thought about retiring a little bit early, but I'm glad she didn't. And the reason for that is that this year has been actually a very positive year for our food service people, including Betty. And she said to me, she made the point of saying to me that what a pleasure it's been to be able to actually, instead of just staying in the cafeteria line, as she's been for 19 of those years, she's been, and if you come into our school, you probably don't because everything's closed, but every morning she greets students at the doorway as they walk in the door with breakfast. Now, you know that meals are free right now, so there's no exchange of cards or any of numbers or money. They prepare the meal, and then she greets students and she says, would you like a breakfast sandwich or would you like a muffin? And it's just changed it for her because it's such a new experience. Same thing with lunches, rather than waiting in the cafeteria line for students to come through. And that can be a little bit of a hectic and not always, you don't always see the best side of kids sometimes in those situations. Now they go up to classrooms, they deliver meals to classrooms. Betty has said it's just been such an eye opener for her because she gets to see kids in a different context than the cafeteria. And so she's had a great year. And so in some ways, of course, I'm sorry to see her go because she's a real joyful part of our food service. But I'm glad that she stayed for this year because of how positive it's been for her. And I think she has been for others.
Thank you. Any other comments? If not, please vote on the retirement.
Yes.
Seven yes.
Okay, 7 yes, 0 no. The motion is approved. Long-term teaching assistant appointment. Upon recommendation of the superintendent, Lucas Perez is hereby appointed to the long-term position of teaching assistant at the middle and high school, replacing Nicole Trainer, commencing on April 12th, 2021 until May 27th, 2021. Salary will be at the per diem rate of $146.56. Step 1, level 3 of the teaching assistant salary schedule for the 2021 school year. May I have a motion on this appointment? Thank you, Martha.
Yes.
Colleen, seconds. Any discussion?
Joseph says this is his favorite teacher.
Let me get there. Sorry, Karen.
Sorry, Liam.
Yeah, sorry.
7 yes.
7 yes, 0 no. The motion passes. Other action items, donation acceptance. Whereas the Lake Placid Central Schools Board of Education Policy 6255, donations, gifts, and grants to the district allow for superintendent of schools to accept on behalf of the board gifts and donations having a value of less than $1,500, whereas monies have been received in a total amount of $2,000 from the Adirondack Foundation Educational Opportunity Fund for the purposes of funding the following: equipment for the new alternative education robotics class. Now there be it resolved in accordance with policy 6255, the Board of Education hereby accepts the checks from the Adirondack Foundation Educational Opportunity Fund in the amount of $2,000 for the project noted above. May I have a motion to accept this donation?
Yeah.
Joan and Daniel, correct. Discussion?
Hopefully they'll get to go back to a robotics competition.
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
7 yes, 0 no?
Colleen didn't vote, is she there on screen?
Yes.
Oh, 7 yes.
Okay, 7 yes, 0 no. So the donation is accepted. The next is a donation acceptance as well. I guess I'll read the whole thing again. Actually, I can pick up where recommended action, whereas monies received in the total amount of $1,500 from the Rotary Club for the purpose of funding the following: book purchases for summer reading at the elementary school. Now, therefore, be it resolved in accordance with policy 6255, the Board of Education hereby accepts checks from the Adirondack Foundation Educational Opportunity Fund in the amount of $1,500 for the project noted above.
Shouldn't I say Rotary Club? Not say Rotary Club. Oh, yep, you're correct. I'll correct it. Thank you.
It is not the Rotary Club?
It is the Rotary Club. It says Adirondack Foundation.
Okay.
Copy and paste.
So now therefore be it resolved in accordance with policy 6255, the Board of Education accepts checks from the Rotary Club in the amount of $1,500 for the project noted above. Thank you. May I have a motion, please?
Yes.
Daniel, and second, Colleen. Any discussion? No discussion, we'll vote.
Lamb,
Yes.
7 yes.
Okay. Special thanks to the Rotary Club for that. Thank you. Recommended action is approve a change in the meeting schedule. Due to spring break, postpone the April 6th regular board meeting until April 13th. In addition, due to the ongoing limits of pandemic and our ability to stream budget hearings online and record them for future use, propose the cancellation of the May 11th, 2021 budget hearing. And this does need a vote, correct?
Yes.
May I have a motion to accept these changes, these two changes?
Yes, I'll make that motion.
Thank
So,
you, Liam.
question, did you change the April 6th meeting to April 13th?
Yes. Postponed from April 6th to the April 13th. Yes. May I have a second?
Yes.
Thank you, Dan. Is that clear to everyone? If there are no comments, please vote.
I can't open up the voting. Everyone will just vote by aye.
Aye.
Yes.
All right.
Any opposed? Motion passes 7 yes, 0 no. D, high-risk sports fall 2. Recommended action. Whereas Governor Cuomo has authorized that high-risk sports can begin on February 1st, 2021 in New York State, whereas Essex County Department of Health issued a statement allowing higher risk scholastic sports can resume on February 1st, following the interim guidance for sports and recreation during the COVID-19 public health emergency. Whereas on February 16th, 2021, the Board of Education voted to allow high-risk varsity sports to begin at Lake Placid Central School effective March 1st, 2021, using the guidelines issued by Essex County Department of Health. Therefore, be it resolved, the following high-risk sports are approved to begin on Monday, March 29th, 2021. They include varsity volleyball and football. Be it further resolved that the high-risk sports adhere to the Essex County Department of Health guidelines. May I have a motion to accept this motion?
Yes.
Thank you, Martha. And second,
Colleen.
Colleen, thank you.
Thank you.
Discussion.
I oppose it just like I opposed the last vote. 2 reasons. We still don't have vaccine that's accessible to everyone. And 2, so it's generally, and 2, I always remain opposed to the football, the football joint team anyway, so. Voting no.
Any other comments?
Do you think it would be,
It might be important just to point out my backup information provided options, but the resolution is only for one of those options.
Correct.
I would want the board to know what they're voting on and to be sure about which of those options they're voting on. So I believe that the resolution is on the option to just varsity sports, which was, I think, my recommendation.
Correct.
Right. The board could choose to vote differently, and I just want to make that clear.
Right. Yeah, the original resolution was to do modified JV and varsity, and based on the decision of, or the discussion last meeting, I believe in all fairness, leaving it to varsity and for equality. Equality? Equity? Martha?
It's definitely equality.
Any further comments? If not, I will ask you to vote.
I have 5 yes and 2 no,
Okay.
with Martha and Liam voting no.
Okay. Thank you. So noted. So the motion passes 5 yes, 2 against. E is athletic merger. Be it resolved, the Lake Placid Central School approves the football merger with Saranac Lake Central School for a period of 1 year, effective 2020 through 2021 school year. May I have a motion for this merger?
Yes. I'm the last one.
Just let's cut to the chase. Let's get.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Joan. Liam, the floor is yours.
Every year I feel like
Rick, why is this being called fall? What did I miss here? Why is this fall 2? What does that mean? High risk sports, is the volleyball, it looks like it was being played in the spring, but why is it being called fall?
Me unmute. Very good question. Right. So there have been all kinds of alterations in the high school sports programs based on all kinds of possibilities that were going to come down. So when they opened fall sports back in the fall, they did not allow for the higher risk sports, volleyball and football, to resume. So they created an artificial season, and the artificial season was called Fall 2, and they set the dates somewhere in this area. Our section set the dates at the ones that are in the resolution. But this Fall 2 season was specifically for the high risk fall sports that couldn't operate back in September, October, November, but could potentially, and now the possibility is real, operate later in the year at this time. So that was the terminology that they chose to use, Fall 2.
Thanks, Roger.
Okay, now it's your turn.
No, it's the seriousness of Hendrix that I oppose this merger every year. And more about it. And our sort of traditional sport, to me in this school, that we can risk the head injuries, I suppose, is hockey. We have one sport that we've sort of accepted as a community that we're gonna accept that risk. It's our tradition and that's our sport. But for that, I always remain opposed to this football merger. And I like it when it's not attached to other sports, that I get sucked into motive for it. I think last year I couldn't give my speech, but.
If you didn't, we heard it anyway. That's appreciated. Thank you.
Oh, no.
I have Daniel abstaining, Gabriel Tosh abstaining, Liam a no, and John yes.
I also agree with that.
So we have 5 yes, 1 no, 1
Rick, you're on mute.
Rick, you're muted.
Say it again.
There's 5 yes, 1 no, and 1 abstention. And I'd like to add to the budget that we get a sound person that can unmute us,
Right.
videographer.
From those federal dollars, it's right.
Coaching assignments, coach assignment. Upon recommended action of the superintendent, approved the coach noted below for fall 2 sports season. Due to the shortened fall 2 season, coaches will be paid at 40% of the coach's rate of the LPEA contract July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2023. May I have a motion to accept the varsity volleyball coach?
Yes.
Daniel and Joan, thank you. Discussion? Just picking on you.
I appreciate it.
Your vote,
Yes.
7 yes.
Okay, 7 yes, 0 no. The motion passes. BOCES board nomination. There's still a blank there, Karen. I'll fill it in. Be it resolved that the Lake Placid Central School Board of Education nominates Richard Preston for a 3-year term of the Franklin Essex Hamilton Board of Cooperative Education Services from July 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2024. May I have a motion, please?
Yes.
Liam and Daniel.
Fast enough.
Thanks so much, Rick, for your continued.
Any discussion?
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rick, for your.
I was going to say something.
You can speak now, Colin.
Colleen, I can hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just saying thank you to Rick for his continued work on this board.
Yeah, thank you. You're welcome.
We were going to nominate you anyway, so you weren't getting away with it.
I tried. That's all I have to say. Brian, Liam.
Yes.
So we have 6 yeses, 1 no. No, it's 6 yeses,
And an abstention.
and I have chosen to abstain.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Rick.
You're welcome. Let's see, H is consent, as is I, unless there are questions on the April 13th special ed packet. For the good of the cause.
There are no emails.
Okay. Adjournment section, next meeting date, locations, April 13th, the 20th, which is the BOCES vote. And you can read those. I don't need to read those to you. Those are in order, I believe. Old agenda items, anything? Or new agenda items? If not, I am going to entertain a motion to go into executive sessions for the purpose of discussing the superintendent search.
Yes.
Thank you, Dan. Second.
Yeah.
Martha? And I'll need a vote.
All right.
I'll take it 7 yes, no opposition. The motion passes. We enter executive session at 8:02 p.m. Welcome, Dale.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, Dana. Hello, Dale.
Hey, Roger.
Dale.
Bye,
Hey,
Roger.
Dana.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Roger.
Thank you, Roger.
Don't think I'll be late tomorrow.
You'll be late tomorrow. Yes, you'll be late tomorrow.
I'll be late.
Bye, everybody.
Hi, Roger. Thank you.
Thanks for letting me go home early.
Wait,